Hello everybody and welcome. My name is Julie Mann and I show men and women how they can create healthy, happy, sustainable lives. And I'm really delighted because today I'm joined by Maggie Gordon-Walker. Hi Maggie.
Hello.
Good to see you. I'm loving that background in your room.
It's quite chaotic, yeah.
So for those of you that don't yet know Maggie, she does a lot of things. She is a performer, a comedian, a writer and a director. So before we get into talking about the specifics of that, Maggie, I'm just really curious to know, did you come from a really creative family?
My father is a writer of thriller novels. That's it as far as I know. On my mum's side, they're all quite larger than life characters, but not particularly within the arts. My grandfather was an MP, so you might argue that's a performance in itself. But yeah.
Wow. And are you doing now what you dreamed of doing as a young girl, or did you have other plans?
No. I wanted to be, my first ambition was to be a biologist. I didn't know what it meant. I just heard the word and thought it sounded cool. I have no scientific ability, so that wasn't going to last long. I wanted to be a ballerina. And then I realised I didn't have the right shape for a ballerina or indeed the skills. But from quite young, I settled on the fact that I wanted to be an actor because I was actually quite shy, which people who know me now are staggered by. But a lot of actors are. So it's a way of hiding behind a character. So I sort of settled on that by the time I was about 10. And of course, lots of people said, don't try and do that. It's an impossible life. That's not going to stop you. So yeah, I don't exactly do what I wanted to do. I did act for some years in London. I use creativity in my work now, but I don't perform in that way. And I've kind of let go of that. I might come back to it, you never know, in later life. But yeah, they were right. It is an impossible life to sustain unless you're one of the 0.000% of actors in equity that get regular work. And I've seen with friends, it can be quite soul destroying, that continual waiting to be chosen. If you're someone who can create your own work, or you've got a company, great. But for people who are just going to auditions waiting to be chosen, I think it's a harsh existence.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree, being an actor myself. And I think all the actors I know, they're all kind of, they're great when they play a role, they're playing someone else, but actually they are quite shy people. So how did you get over that shyness?
It was just once I got on stage, a big confident voice came out. I found it easy to learn lines. I found it easy to make people laugh. So not all actors are comic actors, but if you are, then that's a real joy because you can hear if people are enjoying it. So for me, it was easy. It didn't feel like work. I just instinctively could do it. I knew how to stand, how to move, where the light, all of that. It was just there. So it wasn't difficult for me at all.
Brilliant. I mean, it must be the most wonderful thing hearing people laugh.
Mm.
And conversely, if you don't make them laugh and you are
that is the flip side. If you're in something and it for whatever reason the audience aren't in the right mood or you're a little bit off and they're not laughing, then that's absolute hell. Because if you're doing something that's not supposed to be funny, you can't tell if they're engaged or not. But if people aren't laughing, then they're not enjoying it. And it's like people say after, I was smiling. It's like, I can't hear the smile. Please make some noise out of your mouth.
Yeah.
But generally,
it's a heckle.
What's that? Heckles? Not really. I mean, I didn't do that much on the comedy circuit because I found it quite it's still very male dominated, quite a harsh environment, and it is that kind of gladiatorial, sit back from the audience. Well, come on, then you think you're funny, make me laugh quality, which I didn't particularly like. But no, I don't think, I had kind of bemused silence some of the time, but I performed as a character, not as myself. You could argue that all comedians are actually being a character. None of them are actually themselves when they're up there, not really.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to come back to characters that you created. But can you tell us about your journey from leaving home to where you are now?
Goodness. so I went to Kent University. That's where we're starting. That's when I was 18. I did English and drama degree. And to be honest, to my mind, I think if you want to be an actor, you know, and you want to learn before that, probably university is not the best place to do it. Probably some people watching this will say, oh, I had a brilliant drama training at university. Maybe some are better than others. But I wish, in hindsight, I hadn't done drama at university. I'd done English and philosophy or something like that. Anyway, so I did 3 years there. I came out, I was auditioning for drama schools after that, which took a couple of years before I got a 1-year course at Central. Between that, so I was doing fringe shows and I was involved in lots of different performances and projects, some were very strange. Then I did my year at Central because it wasn't the 3-year course. None of us really had any interest from agents and casting directors, which some would argue is the main point of going, is that showcase at the end and you hope to get an agent. So none of us really did. So I just kind of came back out and started and carried on doing stuff on the fringe and theatre and education and small films and music videos and improvisation. That started growing in me from my late 20s. I think perhaps because I picked up a script quite quickly and I've got quite a quick mind, I often found being in a run of a show, it got quite boring. Whereas with improvisation, obviously it's a different show every night. So, and I like that, and I like the freedom of it. So I did that. And then when I was 34, I had my first child. And that kind of is pretty much game over, I think, for a lot of women in performance, sadly, unless you've established yourself as a name and can take a year or whatever off. For anyone else, that's it, you're gone. And then I moved from London to Brighton, so that doubly compounded it. Because again, yes, obviously things happen in other places, but the bulk of action happens in London. And if you can't be there in an hour's notice, then you're not going to be much of a contender. And then I had another child as well, so that's it, finished with that. But my then partner Chris had formed a couple of theatre companies already. He was pretty entrepreneurial, which I think you have to be. So we formed it was a charity which is still in existence called Livestock, with the idea that it was a performing arts community projects, because that's a moderately easier way to get funding. I looked once at the Arts Council website, and even just to register on the site felt like you were doing a funding form. It's the most, if there's any Arts Council people watching this, it is awful. I mean, for me, I'm educated, I have a degree. I was put off by it. If you were a kind of young working class kid who had a brilliant idea, you wouldn't even get close to it. And it makes me so angry that it's controlled, all the arts funding is controlled by something that's so impenetrable. Anyway, politic rant over. So yeah, we had this charity, and he put on some shows. And at the time I was quite interested, because when I had my first son, who's just about turned 17 now, I found there was a real scarcity of groups I could go to that focused on me and my experience as a woman as well as a mother. It was it was all sort of informal mum and baby groups. So it would just be run by another mum. That was very formless. You might strike lucky and meet someone and have a good conversation, but there was no guarantee of that. And if you were coming in feeling like you were carrying quite a bit of angst, there was no appropriate place to share that. And to my mind, there was either those, or you went to your doctor or health and said, I'm depressed. And then suddenly you're in the system, you're on medication, you're being watched. And thought, well, where is the medium ground where women can come and just talk about what they're going through, but in a kind of structured way? I did find a group, which I went to a few times when I was in London. So I was quite keen to set up a similar thing down here.
I'd like to come back to that, Maggie.
Okay.
I would like to come back to that. But I'm really curious right now to know what's been the most challenging thing you've ever had to face in your life.
Well, one of them was probably nine years ago. A friend and colleague of mine wrote a one-woman show for me, which we'd done at a scratch night, and I went, oh yeah, that was fun. And then she said, well, I've now written the hour-long version, let's do it in the Brighton Fringe. And I said, yeah. Because I realized I'd done small sort of 5-minute slots as a comedy character on a comedy night, but to sustain a kind of best part of an hour-long show, and it had it had a fourth wall. I don't know for those watching who are not, so it means I wasn't speaking direct to the audience. It was as if they were not there. So yeah, and I felt extraordinarily nervous. It went fine. I didn't forget my lines. I had sort of bits of script hidden around the stage just in case, as a kind of backup. Yeah, it went fine. We got a good review. I got good reviews, but as did my friend Sophia, who wrote the piece, and she got nominated for a New Writing South Award for it. So it was all good, but I felt I didn't sleep properly for months, dreading it.
It's so exposing, isn't it? It's you. It's down to you. No matter how great the writing is, ultimately, it's
for sure
you're the one.
And I think, maybe not the case for everyone, but I think it kind of, for me, it tapped into some rather unpleasant experiences I'd had earlier on at drama school about being told I wasn't good enough, and that it exposes if you've got any kind of hang-ups, it'll bring them out and go, hello, here we are. So yeah. But it felt, doing it felt such a mammoth achievement.
Yes, absolutely.
But I didn't want to do it again. That's it. Done. I only need one other person on stage, but I don't want that thing where it's just you and there's no one else.
So apart from the bits of script that were, dotted here and there, how did you deal with, being exposed and, all those feelings that you said it brought up? How did you get through it?
I mean, I think by the time we actually got to it, the dread was actually the anticipation. When I was actually on stage, it was fine. It was, and then I flew, I suppose. It was my thought processes leading up to it was the problem.
Yeah.
Well, I just imagined myself completely drying. It's like the classic dream. Suddenly you're at school and you're just in your underwear. It's like, that's what it felt like. Night after night, I couldn't sleep, worrying about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? That often is the fear of the thing that is the worst part of the whole thing. So what would you say that you love most about what you do?
Well, so as you said in the intro, I do different things. So for me as a performer, it's still, I don't tend to perform much. I have one comedy character. I just do little videos of her and upload them onto YouTube and my Facebook page. So that's just joyous because it's permitted showing off. It's just sort of being funny and silly. And she's a very weird character. I talk about her in the third person like Craig David does. I disassociate myself from her. Merry Christmas, she's called. So that just fulfills the sort of playful part of me. The writing, I kind of do three strands. I do creative writing, I do polemical writing, articles, usually about motherhood, and I do rants about, banks or low-cost airlines or, just things I just like moaning on, basically. But I like to think I'm quite humorous in the way I write about it. So I enjoy that. That feels like fun. And then the other strand is the work, the charity work, but particularly my main project, which is Mothers Uncovered. And that's satisfying because I can see other women who come to us quite broken often by motherhood start to feel more supported and secure.
Amazing. So you talked about Merry Christmas, and yes. I know that on your website you've got a little audio of Merry Christmas.
Yes.
I enjoyed listening to that. But you did have another character called Margot Crabstick.
Oh yeah.
What happened to Mary? Was she married? Was she killed off? What happened to Margot?
To Margot. So yes, interestingly, so the only time I kind of came close to being famous is I did the Funny Women competition in 2006, quite a vintage year because you had Susan Calman and Holly Walsh and Diane Morgan were all in that year as well. So they're all doing pretty well for themselves. And Rosie Wilby is another one. So I did Margot, and it was the first time they decided to try out having a character category. They didn't do it properly. They just had a character, one of the heats was a character night. So I did fine on that, fine at the semi-final, final at the Comedy Store, bombed, because I was one character with 9 other stand-ups. It was the wrong setup. And interestingly, the judges at the semi-final, one hadn't wanted to put me through to the final because she said it's a character and it won't work. And she was absolutely right. And actually, I shouldn't have got through. Of course, the following year, they then did develop a character and variety section, but never mind. So kind of after, because Margot was based on, I won't say her name, they might sue me, but quite a well-known reviewer who tends to be a bit drunk up at Edinburgh. So it was that, but it's a bit of an in-joke, that kind of, so it worked fine for other industry professionals kind of outside of that. Whereas, and also I made the mistake that she was again, there was a fourth wall. Margot didn't engage with the audience, whereas Mary does. Mary talks directly to the audience, so it worked better. So yeah, Margot's still, she could come out if need be, but it was certainly fun playing drunk. Definitely.
Brilliant. So I know that you obviously mentioned that in terms of performing, that's probably the smallest part of what you do. But if someone watching is thinking about going into an acting career, and I know you've mentioned some of the challenges, what advice would you give them?
Well, I mean, it's horrible to have to say it, but if you can develop a backup that's something that you can pick up and put down, and perhaps is a bit more satisfying to you than doing bar work. But if you like doing bar work, then that's fine. But I guess accept that. Start with the negative. I think the more skills that you can develop, the marketable are good. And if you do have any kind of your own creativity, it's a lot easier now because everyone can upload stuff to YouTube. Any kind of stuff that you can create to do that, I think is helpful. If you can gather like minds around you and sort of form a theatre company so that you're not beholden to the whim of a casting director. And when you walk in within 2 seconds whether or not they'll want you, and it's purely on the way you look or the way you come across, regardless of you could be talented, you could not be talented, doesn't matter. And that is soul destroying, I think. Not painting a great picture of it, but I mean, my son, my 13-year-old, has declared he wants to be an actor. Great, because you've got to go for it. What's the point of being alive if you're not going to do what you want to do? But you do have to have a thick skin.
Yeah.
And know that by and large, it's not you. It really is them, it's not you.
I love that you say that, because it really is about not taking it personally. And that can be, the hardest thing, can't it? That kind of perceived rejection can be seen as there's something wrong with us. But actually, like you say, it isn't about that at all.
Particularly so. I mean, I think, if you're a musician, that's hard, but at least you have an instrument that is a separate entity to you.
Yeah.
Or even, less so with a singer, but even your voice is sort of a separate. Whereas an actor, literally anyone can act, can't they, really? Whether or not you can act well, but to actually stand and have words come out of your mouth, it's not a skill like being a ballerina or a top, anyone could technically do it. So therefore there's way more people who think they can do it, and some will strike lucky because they happen to be in the right place at the right time. Yeah. You talked about Mothers Uncovered. Tell us a little bit more about that. I think that was something that you set up. It's over 13 years ago now, isn't it? So. So initially just as a one-off project, I conceived it as in 2008 was the first year. Got funding from the lottery. They changed their remit every now and then. So at the time, they had anything you did, they had to have a creative element to it. So that, served us well. So I thought, let's do three groups, each with a different set of mums, with 4 sessions in each, with the same mums attending all 4, and I'd facilitate it. And I found a filmmaker and a photographer, both of whom were local, both of whom were mothers, because for me, I felt I wanted everyone in the room to have an understanding of what was being discussed. So we set that up, and the first session went fine. Then the second session, we kind of went round, everyone had talked about how they were feeling, and I thought, shit, we're only half an hour in. Because the woman whose group I used to go to, she was a psychotherapist, and I hadn't realised quite how much craft she put into engaging people and drawing them out, and I didn't have those skills yet. I thought, I can wing it. I'm an improviser. So subsequently, I kind of learnt, you know, we needed to have more structured activities in place, and it's kind of evolved over the years. So now it used to be a bit of everything, but now there's a certain slant to the group. So it will be a specific writing group or an art group or a mindfulness. So it's not art as in sitting down at easels and creating a turn. It's sort of art journaling, collaging, and, you know, simple things. So literally, you know, you don't have to have skills to come along and do it. It's more tapping into what's going on inside. That can be quite powerful if a woman's finding it hard to talk about something and you ask her to write it, it'll release something, and then she can kind of get much closer to her experience. And then, yeah, to begin with, it was just me, and then because it's, you know, it's peer support, so essentially the women leading the group should be roughly at the same stage as the people attending it. So as my children got older, that became less relevant. And also I wanted to be doing other things. You know, I wanted more projects and, you know, ideas, also ideas about more things we could do. So then I've got a team of past participants. So that's evolved over the years, because I can only ever offer part-time work. People then go on to do other things. But we have about 7 or 8 women now. So you have 2 women running each group.
So why would someone go to that, Maggie?
I think generally why people come is they say it's different to anything else they go to, which is quite refreshing, I guess. They come because they want to, they feel like I felt, and they want to talk about their experience, but not purely any NHS run groups are generally run by a health visitor or some other professional. So it's an us and them, it's an expert and someone receiving advice. And also the person running it obviously doesn't have to be a mum to run those groups. But in our situation, they do have to be. That's the first and main thing, is they have to be a mother so that they understand. So it's a much more equal footing, I think. So sort of shared understanding. And it's very non-competitive, because that often emerge. People say that they go to baby, oh, is your baby sleeping through night? Because people are scared. So they lash out a bit and they kind of want to assert themselves, and we kind of remove all that, because we have set discussions. Obviously it's not fixed in stone. If a conversation evolves, we can go with that, but we kind of guide women in a way that's going to help them discuss what they're going through and share with each other in a way that supports everyone's different choices. It just feels quite a sort of heartening, life affirming sort of group. And generally, not always, but people will say that they make at least one good friend from that group, someone who they feel, I think it fast tracks people to good friend status, rather than, you know, which normally would take a long time to get to. But because they're in quite an emotionally heightened state, and there's always tears, you know, right from the first group, someone's crying. So it kind of gets past that peculiarly English embarrassed stage to sort of thinking, I'm not coping today, I can phone up my friend and tell them that, and they'll be all right with that. So yeah,
sounds wonderful. Have you got a long-term kind of plan with that, Maggie?
Well, we've been trying for years to sort of expand it. It's slightly tricky, because I think certainly I've had the experience, and I expect other people have too. It's different if you've got a product to sell. That's the same wherever it's sold. If it's a service and it's evolved in a particular place around a particular person or set of people, and you try and replicate it somewhere else, you run the risk of it not quite working, because it's evolved from a particular time and place. So when lockdown started, well, you know, it meant our in-person groups had to close. We moved online, and so then that was great, because we actually had women joining from all around the country. So that kind of did technically expand. But yeah, my plan is to try and have it running in places which will support the kind of the ethos that we've set up. That'd be one plan. The other plan is my campaigning arm. You see, I am my grandfather's granddaughter. I've got that kind of drive for sort of social justice. So for me, I've kind of concentrated particularly on mothers' rights and how they're perceived in the world. Not in terms so much of getting paid, although I do also support the basic income cause, which everyone would get paid, but that's a sort of separate issue. But just around how mothers are regarded, the whole language around it, the whole way they're treated. And I don't know if you saw this on any of the stuff you looked at, the word matrescence, which I found out about 2 years ago, which means the process of becoming a mother. Because the way it's couched at the moment, it's very, you're either, you're okay, or you're postnatally depressed, or maybe you have some baby blues. It's kind of, it's not very dignified, the language. It's belittling, a lot of it. And it compartmentalizes women into being a problem, which needs a diagnosis. So postnatal depression is a very medical term. It's limited, and it's, you know, it's stigmatizing, and it says you are a problem. You have a problem that needs to be solved, rather than saying you have now entered a new phase of your life. Because that's the other, because obviously we're all here because we had mothers. That's how the world operates. People have been having babies forever. But just because that's the case doesn't mean to say that they've coped. And also it's a short-term strategy to say, oh, well, you've had the baby seems to be all right, so do you, get on with it. But then if the mother is not supported, that message will transmit itself to the child will then grow up with problem, and it kind of perpetuates through the generations. Whereas if you put the time into supporting women at the start, then I mean, it's not going to solve all problems, of course it isn't, but many studies have shown the impact on a child of a mother who's not been properly supported. So yeah, part of my campaign is getting this word matrescence out into the world. It's like adolescence, but matrescence. So yeah, I have a petition for that. I'm trying to get a cross-party group of MPs together to promote this. I would like the word to just be in common parlance in the way that adolescence is. That's my campaign, because I think that would have massive impact on how, you know, if women feel they have a term to describe the state that they're in, they can start to own it.
Yeah, wow, that's so powerful. I love it. Obviously, Maggie, I'm going to put all your links below this video, so please check Maggie out. Presumably that petition you can...
Sure, yeah, I mean, you can easily find it on change.org/support matrescence.
Okay. Fantastic. Yeah, well, I think
it's been sitting there for years. It's changed over the years, my petition, because it kind of went, I didn't know the word matrescence when I set it up. So luckily you can edit. So yeah.
So that's a great word. And I think actually if you post the link to the petition, that'd be great. So
yes, it's not my word. I should point out, I haven't invented it. I just discovered it too. It was actually coined. Let's credit the woman as Dana Raphael. She was called an anthropologist, and she coined it nearly 50 years ago.
Wow. And yet it's not a word that...
It's not. It's slightly in the east coast of America. A woman, she's called Alexandra Sachs. She did a TEDx talk. So it's slightly better known there on East Coast. And in France, they seem to know it fairly well. Here it's known. Medical people have heard of it. It's just not commonly known.
Yeah, but it needs to be widely known, doesn't it?
I think so.
To women and to men, of course, as well. So one final question, Maggie. When you're no longer on this planet, how would you like to be remembered?
Oh, goodness. Oh, wow. Someone who was fun and feisty and stood up for what she believed in.
Love that. Absolutely love that. It's been so great talking to you. Maggie Gordon-Walker, thank you ever so much.
Thank you.